Hello everyone, my name is Ariel Giovannetti and I am a first year undergraduate student in War Studies and History at King's College London. So a little bit about me. I am Italian and French and I have been raised all my life in Italy while also having the chance of attending a French international school in Rome where I got to meet people from all over the world and that was great. So I have found out about arts for refugees thanks to this internship, and I already read my fair share of articles during periods in between lectures, and I'm glad I found it because I have unknowingly been looking for a platform like this one for quite a while. Which also brings me to why I applied for this internship in the first place. So, broadly speaking, my academic area of interest is military strategy during the Middle Ages and in the early modern world. So, yeah, nothing that really has to do with recent events. and maybe that's for the best, because there's many talented people interested in everything going from World War One to today, and so I will leave that to them. But I had and still have the chance of studying at very international institutions, and I have been raised in an open-minded family that taught me the importance of learning about every culture and every history, and I thought this project could help me connect with like-minded people who concern themselves with politics and discuss the present while also looking at the future, which is something that in general the university that I have the chance of attending is really good at, but one should always seek more, right? So for me, this was something totally new, as I'm used to talking about the Third Crusade or the 7 Years' War, of which close to nothing remains anyways. But the people of Syria, Iraq, Congo, they're still here, and they're suffering. And it's easy today to just look at the news and read about Ukraine and Palestine, but there have been decades-long conflicts that news agencies don't bother covering anymore because they're just not trendy enough and people are just not interested in them enough. And we're interested in a war, but always forget to look at its aftermath, and that's something that, in general, war studies students also experience. We love to talk about bayonets, but when it comes to humanitarian help, no one knows what actually happened. And when I say look at the aftermath of a conflict, I don't mean the number of deaths or why did America intervene in Afghanistan in the first place, but the stage it left the people in and what help is being given to them, and if anything else, what other type of help could be given to them. So my article is actually on Rwanda. It's called Rwanda's Road to Unity, Rebuilding a Post-Genocide Society, and I don't know if you read the article first or if you're listening to this first, but why did I choose Rwanda? Well, I chose it because I always looked at either Europe or the Middle East, and I wanted to leave my comfort zone, even though I'm already out of my comfort zone anyway. And second to this, a very, very dear friend of mine, childhood friend, moved to Rwanda 5 years ago. And when he told me about the genocide, I was 13 and have never heard about it. It shocked me to see how much there was to be said though, yet how little of it I saw on any news outlets. I never talked about it with anyone from my entourage, and I just never knew about it, and I felt so ignorant, and I was so mad at everything and everyone for not telling me before about it. And as I say in the article, this genocide isn't like any other, although no genocide is identical to another one. It still remains a horrible bloodshed. But for this one specifically, it happens at the end of the Cold War, and the majority of the world didn't want to concern themselves with conflicts anymore. They have had enough, right? And because of a lack of concern, it hadn't even been recognized as a war at the time, much less as a genocide. And so perhaps bloodshed at such a scale could have been avoided. There were still problems and tensions within the country that would have eventually led to some type of conflict. But generals in France knew about it, other members of the international community knew about it, and even if not explicitly, they could have just gone there by themselves and see with their own two eyes. And so I found it so interesting that I wanted to share with the world from my perspective, which is a little bit of a different perspective. I try to look more at psychology. First because, well, since it has been exactly 30 years since the end of the genocide, the events are very widely remembered, and Rwanda is a very, very young nation. If I'm not mistaken, it's either the or amongst the most young country in Africa. And this means that more than half of its inhabitants were born after the genocide. They have no idea. But all of them have to live with survivors, with families of victims. And again, we talk about humanitarian aid in general, but I never saw mental health programs being so widely implemented in a post-conflict community. Of course, food, water, and infrastructures are needs that need to be answered immediately, but in the long run, a society of traumatized people cannot come together and look at the future, and there's unsolved emotional and psychological trauma. So, I will not tell you about what I think it's important to remember from my article, because everyone will take something different from it. Reading in general is a personal experience that depends on your understanding, on your level of interest in the topic. So I kind of want to discuss what are things that I'd like for readers to know about Rwanda, and in general I think that I didn't have the chance of talking about in what I wrote, because of course I have a limited amount of words anyways. But my main point is that it's important to look at the future. And maybe it sounds cliche coming from a history student. Actually, no, it does sound cliche coming from a history student. But the past matters just as much as the future. Why? Well, in the 20th century, we saw the independence and birth of many countries. And for such young states, building a national history, a national narrative is fundamental because it gives them identity. So, for example, Greece asked the Parthenon frieze back after its independence from the Ottoman Empire. Also, that's also an open debate right now. And why did they ask to freeze? Well, because it was a significant part of their national identity. It belonged to their history. It gave them a sense of belonging that is crucial to a newly formed nation. They need to build not only a credibility for themselves, for the international community, but also for the national aspect of it. The people need to feel like they belong to the nation. And something else, because history, I believe, gives closure. So building a national narrative that shouldn't be just national but globally acknowledged should be the top priority, because we still have national narratives that are divergent, that don't go the same direction. Until some years ago, France and Algeria had very different retellings of the Algerian question, as France used to call it, until 2016, when it finally acknowledged that it was, in fact, a war. Turkey doesn't acknowledge the existence of genocides because of what it committed in Armenia. So we need a history that both gives national identity to independent states, but also gives a correct retelling of what happened on a global scale. And this brings me to my last point. A correct narrative gives justice to victims and survivors. Well, why? Because they feel seen. They feel as if what they've gone through has been actually written down and explained and is being taught in schools, and maybe this will discourage future generations from ever recreating such conflicts again. So this is why I think that history is very important, and I would have liked to discuss this more in the article, but this wasn't about history. This was about the people that lived in the agony of a genocide and that still live in the agony of its remembrance. And to finish what I'm trying to say, I think that being able to live a life free of war is a privilege, and that we people who live in countries that are at peace have a duty towards broken communities to help shed light on what they've gone through and what they're still enduring. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you either liked my article or that you will like it, and bye bye.